In this video, I'm going to show you a way that you can manually blend different exposures. We normally think of this as HDR, and we use several exposures, and we take the software and have it blend them for us. There are some situations where that just doesn't do the job. And one example I have found is if my image is a very soft image, and I use the software to do this, it tends to lose some of that texture. So I'm going to show you where you can just blend the part of the second exposure that you want to use into the original. And to do this, I've provided you with a folder of today's material that's HDR manually, and in it is a folder called Blending. So if you will go right now and go to File Open in your software, navigate to that folder where it says Blending Images, and find the over and underexposed images. You'll also notice the PDF file there, which will give you the directions of what I'm doing on the video. So we're going to choose those two images and open them in whatever editor you're using. And in this case, in Elements, I see the two of them in the bar back here, but I'm going to want to use both of those images and make them visible, so I pull them apart so they're both visible. If yours are tabbed to the screen at the top, you will need to pull them off that in order to see them side by side. So in this case, I have to decide which of these is the better exposure for the final image. Quite obviously, the underexposed one has most of the mood that I want to keep. So I'm going to make that my final image, but I want to bring the other image in as a layer on top of this image so that I can choose part of that image to appear in the final. So I will activate the overexposed image, and when I drag it into this final one, I want to hold my Shift key down so that it comes in and matches or is aligned with the final one. So be sure you have your Move tool, hold the Shift key, keep the Shift key down while you drag, lift your dragging finger, and then lift the Shift key. If you lift the Shift key too soon, you'll lose the alignment. And I might mention here that people in Photoshop CC can also come in and use the Align Layers option just to be sure they are aligned. For Elements, it's just a very complex process to try to align layers. But I have found if the images were taken on a tripod, which of course they should have been, and if you use the Shift key, then you will find that they align quite well, as they do here. So now that we're over in the final image, we don't need this original one. You can either close it or you can just minimize it to get it out of the way. It's no longer going to be used, and so it's just confusing sometimes to have both of them visible. So while you have this, we now need to decide what part of that upper layer do we want to use. Well, I've experimented with different darks selections, and you have your own image. You will need to explore what selection captures the part that I want to use. And I tried out several, and I found out that Darks 2 seemed to get the part of the image I wanted. All you do is try several selections and look at what part they are capturing, and use the one that works the best. So to do that, I'm going to go into the Action panel to TK Selections. I'm going to highlight Darks 2, and I'm going to play that selection on my image. There's an important step here, and that is, and I'll explain more of it in detail, we need to save this selection. Sometimes you don't do that, and I've discussed this in the written work more thoroughly. So what we're going to do is go up to the Select menu, pull it down till you see Save Selection, and name it. And of course, I'm naming it Darks 2. So I know exactly what selection is up there. And say OK. I'll explain to you later when we use that selection why it was necessary. But right now, we have the part of this image that we want to see. All we have to do while the selection is active is add a layer mask. That's that rectangle with the gray circle. If you add it, it suddenly limits what's visible to the part that I selected. And then if you want to know what did I do to the image, you come up and hide the top layer by going to the eyeball And you'll see that we lightened that foreground very lovely. And you realize how there's no indication of where the adjustment starts and stops. That's the wonderful part of the luminosity selections. They blend from the one that's strongly chosen to those that aren't at all. And then, as I look at that, I know that I frequently can't get the exact exposure I want from that selection. So I would like to lighten it a little bit under great control. And to do that, I'm going to use a levels adjustment layer with a mask that has the same darks too. And if you're not too familiar with using masks or selections, you may not realize if I went ahead now and reselected darks too, I would get a totally different selection. Because once it's been applied, it isn't the same if I go back and get it again. It's going to recompute it. And so the way I have chosen to do it, hoping it is clearest to you, is to say, if I will go back and get that select menu, and this time I'm going to load the selection, I must go and pull down and find my selection I call darks 2 and say, okay, it's exactly the same selection as before, and I want to apply it to a levels adjustment layer. So if I go to the adjustment layer window and click it open and go down to levels and open it, I get the same mask on that levels adjustment layer. So if I make changes with this adjustment, it will only be applied to the selection that I brought in. So come down and open. If you don't see your levels adjustment panel, you double click on that thumbnail and it will bring it up. And when I adjust from a luminosity selection, I go to the farthest part from the pixel. So I'll go to the white point. This very gradually will move the midpoint closer to the pixels. And as the midpoint gets closer, they will lighten. So as I drag this, I want to watch my image. And I'm going to try it after just a short distance to see if I like it. And the way I find it is go to the levels adjustment layer, hide the eyeball, and see what it did. And there will be a point as I drag that in where the result is what I want. And so you might have to try it and keep going back and forth till you get the result you want. I have found that I don't take it too far. I don't need a lot of brightness on that. I just wanted a little bit of brightness added. And then I double check my work to be sure I'm satisfied with the result. And then, of course, at the end, we want to see what we did to the original exposure. So we come to the bottom, and while you hold the Alt Option key, click on the eyeball for the background layer, turns off everything, and turns it back on. And again, I'm sitting here, and if I think I overdid that levels adjustment layer, I just change it. And again, I recommend that if you're doing work like this, that you save this as a Photoshop document and keep all of your layers. Sometimes I work late at night, and the next day I come and I say, Gloria, I don't like what I did. Well, if I've saved it as a Photoshop document, I can open it and make further adjustments. So, maybe that levels adjustment doesn't suit me the next day. I can go right in, providing I didn't blend those layers into a JPEG. Providing I left them open, I can work on it. So that gives you a different way of bringing two exposures together. And those of you who've worked with HDR software know that if I were to take this image and blend another image into it, it would be very hard to get the delicate change and not lose the mood of the image. I really recommend this when you don't have a very dramatic scene that benefits from the traditional HDR. This is a very good alternate method.